Hello, everyone. It's Phil Lee returning with another episode of Inside Digital Media. Today is the Tuesday, the 4th of May, 2021. Today, I want to talk about the Memphis 1866 race riot. So before I do that, let me notify you to click on the subscriber button below if you'd like to subscribe to future episodes of Civil War Chat, and also the notification bell in the upper right to be notified of when those episodes come out. Well, let me pull up my notes on this riot. 155 years ago this month, Memphis exploded in a race riot that modern academics blame on Southern whites, typified by ex-Confederate soldiers. They seldom explained that former Confederates had no voice in either the state or local governments in Tennessee at that time. In truth, Tennessee's ex-Confederates were not allowed to vote until 1866, and this riot was in ex-Confederates were not allowed to vote until 1868, and this riot was in 1866. The Memphis riot happened when Carpetbag and Scalawag regimes controlled the applicable state and city governments. In 1866, the state government was controlled by Republican scallywag Parson Brownlow. He was the governor who had disfranchised ex-Confederates in 1865. Similarly, Irish immigrants with no connections to the prior Confederacy controlled the Memphis city administration because neither ex-Confederates nor blacks could vote in 1866, which left the Irish immigrants in the driver's seats, because the Irish immigrants typically arrived from the north and they had no connections with the Confederacy. Thus, they could take the loyalty oath that enabled them to vote, which an ex-Confederate could not take. And we talked about the loyalty oath here, several episodes ago on Civil War Chat. You can go back and look that up. But nonetheless, it was the Irish immigrants that controlled Memphis. The year after the riot, Parson Brownlow's legislature gave the Tennessee blacks the right to vote in 1867 in the state of Tennessee. And that was a year before Brownlow's successor began to start enfranchising ex-Confederates again. Following the abolition of slavery in the state's February 1865 constitutions, blacks from the surrounding countryside swarmed into Memphis, causing the city's population to grow from 35,000 to 66,000 in 1866. As a result, half of the city's population was black. A quarter was ex-Confederate Southerners, and a quarter was Irish and other whites. Consequently, the Irish increasingly feared competition from the freedmen in the labor market. They also grew apprehensive about the freedmen's potential to compete politically, given black suffrage discussions then in progress in the capitals of Nashville and Washington. Even though the Irish composed 90% of the police force, about 4,000 black troops were garrisoned at nearby Fort Pickering as a component of a postbellum federal occupation force across the South. A confrontation between two hack drivers, one black and one white, on April 30th, 1866, triggered the riot. Now, when police arrived to stop the brawl, a group of onlookers composed mostly of recently discharged troops, black troops, from Fort Pickering stoned the police. The soldiers had been celebrating their release from the army, and some were intoxicated. After a while, the two sides went their separate ways. The next day, a larger group of soldiers again gathered in the street, again celebrating with intoxicants their discharge from the army. 4 policemen tried to disperse them, but the soldiers chased them away. Gunfire erupted a second time. This time, the police obtained reinforcements and several soldiers were killed before returning to Fort Pickering. While the black soldiers remained at the fort, the police, firefighters, and an armed posse of other whites, deputized by the sheriff, attacked the city's comparatively unarmed blacks. After a 2-day rampage, the local army commander declared martial law. A total of more than 40 blacks and 2 whites had been killed. So I'm speaking here of a 2-day rampage of when the police, the firefighters, and the posse rampaged in the city. But there were 2 days prior to that when the riot started. It was principally between the police and the black soldiers. So there's a total of 4 days. Although a tragic event, consider that it happened under the following circumstances that historians seldom mention. First, the fighting did not break out between ex-Confederate Southerners and blacks. Instead, it was between the Memphis police and black soldiers at a time when Northern Irish immigrants controlled the Memphis police, not Southern whites. Second, ex-Confederates did not control the state government at this time. In fact, they had no voice in it because they were not allowed to vote or hold office. Neither could they vote or hold office in Memphis for the local elections. Third, the attacks on the blacks were not led by ex-Confederate civilians, but by the Memphis police force, which again was 90% staffed by the Irish immigrants from the north. Fourth, Southern civilians did not enter the fray until the 3rd day of this 4-day riot, when they were deputized by a local government controlled by carpetbaggers and scalawags. Fifth, several army commanders, including General Ulysses Grant, had warned War Secretary Edwin Stanton that it was unwisely provocative to use black soldiers as Southern occupation troops. Nonetheless, Stanton may even have deliberately used them in hopes of provoking a race riot in order to embarrass President Andrew Johnson, who was a political opponent of the Secretary's wing of the Republican Party. Historian Ludwell Johnson wrote, quote, "Some Memphians suspected that Stanton employed Negro garrisons in hopes of provoking violence that he could use to his political advantage," close quote. 6, the disproportionate black to white death ratios was not isolated to the South, the death ratios in these riots. In fact, the Memphis ratio bore a strong resemblance to the New York City riots of 1863, where the number of killed and wounded was actually much bigger. Finally, since the Irish controlled the local government, they had greater reason to resent potential black suffrage than did the ex-Confederates, who had already been disfranchised. In their haste to blame white Southerners, modern historians often overlook this point. So that really summarizes what I wanted to say about the Memphis race riot of 1866. And that's one reason I went to this today is yesterday's discussion was about the disfranchisement of ex-Confederates in the state of Tennessee. And you can see how that links into this discussion. I think about a week or so ago, I discussed the disfranchisement of Confederate whites, ex-Confederate whites across the South outside the state of Tennessee, which also adds some context to this. And I may decide here to also do a episode on the New Orleans riot of 1866, which also has extenuating circumstances that modern historians ignore. They just ignore it because they simply want to portray and demonize white Southerners as evil. So if you'd like to learn more about Southern Reconstruction, I want to recommend my book, Southern Reconstruction by Philip Lee. It's $22 at Amazon, $25 if you want an autographed copy directly from me. You would get an autographed copy by writing me, emailing me, Phil, PHIL _Lee, LEIGH @me.com. I will pay the postage here in the United States, so you get an autographed copy for $25. Additionally, I would like to recommend, and I think you'll find helpful, my book, U.S. Grant's Failed Presidency, which is also about Reconstruction and also the corruption that laced through his presidency. If I were to retitle that book, I might, instead of saying when U.S. Grant's failed presidency and instead make it U.S. Grant's selfish presidency, because he was completely out for himself. Seems to me in a way kind of like Joe Biden is. But nonetheless, that's a separate point. Okay, I want to thank you. That's our show for today, and I want to thank you for watching.